Om Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshidam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjanam Shalake Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. So, since this is not a formal satsang, because we are in a house, so it's like a maybe family gathering or something like that. So, can you hear me? Yeah? Or the fan is disturbing you? If you just switch off that fan, then you can hear. Now? Yes. Because the wind carries the voice away over our heads, you know. So, somebody just now asked me, what are you going to speak on? So I said, I have no idea. So we'll sit down here and see what's good for us, and then we'll discuss this. I thought that I would talk to you today on a topic which has been interesting not only people from India but also from abroad, outside India. Some of the very good interpretations and translations of this particular text have been written by people like Annie Besant and so on. Well, there are other translations also. And this is the Bhagavad Gita. In India, many people have heard of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not so sure nowadays in the modern world, but generally yes. And so we are going to look at the Bhagavad Gita today in this satsang. First, a little bit of background about the Gita. It occurs in this great text called the Mahabharata, and is part of the Bhishma Parva, the chapter on Bhishma. And may I request everybody to switch off their cell phones, because in between we might hear the Anahat Nad. So, the Bhagavad Gita. Now the Bhagavad Gita, the meaning of Bhagavad Gita, the word meaning. Bhagavat, Bhagavan, is God, Supreme Being, or Lord, let's say Lord. And Gita is Gitam, which means a song. So actually the Gita is not chanted, it's sung, because it's a Gitam. Unfortunately we have lost the tune of singing the Gita. It can be revived. So it's a song of the Lord. So we have to see why it's called the song of the Lord. Before that, let me explain that the Gita, I'm sure many of you would have read it, has 18 chapters. It's like a very large golf links. 18 holes. You don't have the 19th watering hole, but 18 holes. And it's actually, to read the Gita, it's like going from one step to another systematically till you come to the last. So of the adhyayas, the chapters are called adhyayas, 18 chapters. Now, why is it called a Gitam? A song. It could be it could be prose. Why is it? Because the subject matter of the Gita, which is the human being and the human being's link to the Supreme Reality, is better understood between the words than through words. And what is this that links you? It's music. In the morning I discussed this a little bit at the Theosophical Society. Music or song, or the sound of music, is important because it needs no language. A guitar has a language, of course, but when you say a song, when you say music, it doesn't need a language. Even if somebody is singing in a foreign language, foreign to us, maybe their own language, if the tune is good, we enjoy it. Music. Now when there is pure sound of music, like I conceive it as Krishna playing the flute in Vrindavan somewhere, and the gopis don't know now what to do. They're just distracted by it. That sound, there is no language involved. Music cuts across the barriers of language. Language is very useful. If you don't have language, how can I convey things to you? True. However, language, as much as it can unite, can also divide. And in India we know this. So many languages, and sometimes somebody says, oh, India is one, but somebody, no, but we are Gujaratis or Malayalis or Marathis. It's there. So language can be very good, but very creative and uniting. It can also be divisive. However, music has no such problem. If somebody plays Beethoven symphony or Mozart, we don't need words. You enjoy it. I mean, if you like that kind of music, you enjoy it. Or somebody is playing the veena, or somebody is playing the flute. No need for words. In fact, if somebody starts to speak in between, it's a terrible thing. You say, stop it. Let me listen to the music. So therefore the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the Lord, means that sound of music which can reach the heart, cutting across all barriers of language. Although the Gita, having been written by Vedavyasa, was written in the language of the day, which was Sanskrit. Sanskrit itself, the language, has very musical connotations to it. It's not just a description of a word, it has a lot of music involved. People who chant Sanskrit know that you just cannot chant what you want. You need to go according to certain pattern and rhythms. So the rhythm and the pattern of music affects the heart. Please, I'm not talking about the heart that pumps blood, not the organ heart. I'm talking about the core of one's being, which somebody says he's a heartless man, or I say deep down in my heart. This is the heart I'm talking about. Or when I say me, I usually touch here and say I don't say I, right? Unless it's terrible, I say I. So that heart. So the 18 chapters, 18 adhyayas, the Gita, and a song. Now, if you need to get music out of a flute, for instance, what is the requirement? Basic. Can you bring music out through a solid wood, or do you need a hollow bamboo to hear this? There is no space when there is something solid. And fortunately, we can't listen to the Gita because our flutes are filled with so much muck, all kinds of muck. From the past, the present, our dislikes, likes, anger, the hubris, it's filled. So the first requisite for the understanding the music of the Lord is that the flute that is given should be really hollow. And from our point of view, from the yogic teachings, because I come from the Nath Sampradaya, Gorakhnath, much in the Nath. So according to us, the flute of the Lord, with no muck, absolutely clean, and with 7 holes to play the different tones is on the spine of the human being. Is the spine. The Sushumna Nadi, which is in the center, which is the core of the central nervous system anatomically, is the flute which has to be emptied of all negativity, cleaned up, space created, and left, surrender to the music. Okay? So, now from all these abstract imagery, let's come down to the practical side. Let's start with the first chapter of the Gita. Now wait. Now, what is the content of the Gita? The Gita itself describes the content at the end of every chapter. The end of every chapter, you don't mind if I do a little Sanskrit, right? It sounds good also. There's music to the ears. So, but I would translate everything. Every chapter ends with, in fact, if you know many Indian languages, you can easily grasp Sanskrit. When people say, oh, I can't, I say, do you know any Indian language? Because there are so many Sanskrit words. You just listen carefully. I may not have to translate it. Like, Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Asu. This is how it ends, every chapter. That means, Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Asu. This is the great Sri Bhagavad Gita, Song of the Lord. Upanishads, it is the teaching of the highest level Vedic understanding, which is the Upanishad. And what does the Upanishad teach? Brahma Vidyayam, knowledge of the Supreme Brahman. And plus it is a Yoga Shastra, which means the practical understanding of how to move towards the Brahman. If you theoretically say, I am the Brahman, it doesn't work. We are not. If somebody says fool, then you're angry. So you're not the Brahman, obviously. But it's theory. I am Brahman. It's not possible. So to touch that, you need to have a practice or a method. Can we take this off? So then this is good. It's okay, I'll sit. I am happy this way. I am okay.
Otherwise I can push that back.
No, the flute is straight. So, Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So, this is the Gita. Upanishads. So, it is the knowledge that is taught by the Upanishads. Brahma Vidyayam, moving towards the knowledge of the Supreme Being. Yoga Shastra, the practical method of yoga by which one can touch that. Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade, the dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna. And this is the Gita. Then they give the chapter. Depends on which chapter. Now this is how every chapter ends. So therefore, if the Gita is the teaching of the Upanishads, wouldn't it be nice if you look at the Upanishads first? But I would say, the Upanishads are a little bit too abstract. There are over 100 Upanishads. Out of them there are the 11 major Upanishads. Why 11 major Upanishads? Because they are the Upanishads which have been interpreted by all the acharyas, all the teachers from Shankara onwards, or maybe before Shankara, Gaudapada. But it's not such a simple thing to go into the Upanishad, although we try to simplify it to the best extent possible. Now the Gita, in very simple words, describes the essence of the Upanishad. Now if I may again chant a little bit of Sanskrit. In the introduction to the Gita, Vyasa himself describes the Gita. Sarvo Upanishato Gao. If all the Upanishads are the cows, Sarvo Upanishato, if all the Upanishads are conceived as cows, Dugdha Gopala Nandana, if Krishna is considered to be the one who milks the cow. Gopalanandana is the child of Gopal. Gopal, who is the baby of Nanda. And suppose Krishna is considered to be the one who milks the cow. If all the Upanishads were cows, Partho Vacha, Partha is Arjuna, with whom the dialogue happens in the Gita. If Partha is considered to be the calf, when the calf hits the udder with its head, then milk is released. So every now and then you'll see Arjuna say, "Oh, you said this, but I can't understand this. Can you clarify?" This is why it's called a dialogue. Samvada. In a samvad there are two people. It's not a monologue. Right? So, actually sama, meaning it has many, Sanskrit is such a language, many variations. Sama actually means equal. So here Arjuna and Krishna are sitting together in the chariot. Equal ground. Although Krishna is the one who guides the chariot, of course. And it also means means coming together. I think the Greek word, the Latin word sam, comes from sama, samnam bonam, and so on. So, if all the Upanishads were cows, Dugdha Gopala Nandana, if Krishna milks the cow, and Arjuna is the calf that constantly is asking for milk, Sudhir Bhokta, which the wise men enjoy. Sudhir actually means wise. I'm sure many people have names Sudhir. Sudhir means wise. Bhokta means those enjoy the milk. Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat. This milk is the immortal nectar of the Gita. This is how it's described. So instead of going and reading all the Upanishads separately, you say, start with the Gita and you have the essence in beautiful dialogue form in the Gita. Okay. So now, the first chapter of the Gita. This is the first chapter of the Gita. Is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. The yoga of Arjuna's dissatisfaction, the yoga of Arjuna's sorrow, the yoga of Arjuna's insecurity. Vishada is a word in Sanskrit, so you need many words to explain it. It's not just one literal translation. So you can say it's the yoga. Here yoga means each chapter is called a yoga. This is the yoga of Arjuna's insecurity, dissatisfaction, sorrow. Sorrow is basic. So even though the Gita gives you the picture of Arjuna in sorrow, and since it's supposed to have been set in the battlefield, not in a cave, I think it's a study that is for all of us, because we are not actually in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but we all have this battlefield of life. We are in the middle of the battlefield. Very often we don't know what step to take, which decision to take, and sorrow is with all of us. Well, we have happiness when we eat ice cream. If you have a sore throat, you have sorrow tomorrow, but that's a different. But we do have, there is nobody who doesn't have some sorrow or the other, some pain. It's part of our lives. Of course there is. I think there are snatches of happiness and then we subside back to the sorrow. You would say that I am a very pessimistic guy, but it's true. We look at it carefully. So Arjuna is in the same position as all of us. So the Gita's message is meant for all of us. We are in the same position as Arjuna. In this battlefield of life, we don't know where to move. And sometimes we are so overpowered by sorrow that we are just stuck. We don't know what to do. What's the right decision to take? How do I move forward? And there, the music of the Lord, the teachings of Krishna come to save us and pull us out of this mess. This is the Gita. And there's something very interesting in the Gita. The king who is listening to what's happening in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. What's his name? Tell me. The king. Dhritarashtra is blind. So he is sitting in the palace. Oh, we have done your Gita homework. Good. Dhritarashtra is sitting in the palace and he wants to know from Sanjay, not Sanjay Gandhi, Sanjay. He wants to know what's happening in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. But Sanjay is sitting in the palace. So apparently there's some kind of a screen, I don't know what. Maybe in the mind or maybe really some kind of a closed circuit camera or whatever. So Sanjay sits there and this explains blow by blow all that happens in the battlefield of Kurukshetra to Dhritarashtra. This is how the Gita begins. Because Dhritarashtra asks Sanjay, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samveda Yuyutsava Mamakam Pandavaschaiva Kim Kurvate Sanjaya. So he begins, note how he addresses the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Kauravas he says, my people. In the Pandavas, what's happening? Sanjaya, please tell me. So this is how it starts. So anyway, so as it proceeds from Arjuna Vishada Yoga, Yoga of Arjuna, sorrow and uncertainty, it moves on to the next chapter, which is Sankhya. First Krishna says, hey Arjuna, you were all right till now. What's happened to you? What has overtaken you that you say, oh, I'm going to take sannyas. I'm giving up this battle. He says, do you think you're doing a wise and virtuous thing? Oh, you're mistaken. You're just afraid that you might lose. It's not any high thought that you have. You're not Vashishta. He didn't use that word. I'm saying this. You are saying this because you're afraid that you might lose the battle. But you are the ruler. And the ruler has the right to fight for dharma, for goodness. If the Kauravas take over, you know what the country is going to be like. And it's your duty to protect it. So, move forward. Then Arjuna is not convinced. He's dropped his bow. I used to know a great man who is originally from Ahmednagar, but was in Pune for many years, whose name was Achyut Patwardhan. He was the person who during the freedom struggle, along with, I forget the name of this lady, who climbed up and pulled down the British flag in 1942 and put up the Indian flag. So he was underground for many years. It's called the Quit India movement. Arjuna Safali and Achyut Patwardhan. So he resigned, of course, from politics, and I used to know him quite well. He was such a brave man, and then when he quit politics, his nephews used to call him Arjuna without the bow. I just remembered this. And so Krishna says to Arjuna, what's happened to you? Why are you behaving like Achyut Patwardhan? He was not there then, I'm joking. So, why have you put down? Move forward. Move forward. So, but you must say this, that Achyut Patwardhan was offered a cabinet post. You were offered the post of the President of India. There were many good things offered to him. He said, no, I didn't get into the freedom struggle for this. I'm out. So anyway, during my younger days, I was very much with close friend of his. So he considered me like a friend. So I can't help mentioning this wonderful man. Anyway, so from there, Krishna then starts teaching Arjuna about the cosmology and cosmogony and the structure of matter and where it comes from and so on. And this is the next chapter called Sankhya Yoga. You know, Sankhya is attributed to the great Muni Kapila. And even though the terms of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, the Gunas, and everything come from the Sankhya, it's also used by all the Vedantins who don't belong to the Sankhya order, like Adi Shankara and so on. It's such an important and oldest philosophy known in India. In fact, it is so important that when Krishna declares his true essence to Arjuna in the 10th chapter, when he says, among the mountains I am the Meru, and among the immovables I am the Himalaya, Himachala. Achala means immovable, Himachal. And among the Vedas I am the Samaveda. Note, not Rig Veda, I am the Samaveda, because Samaveda is the root of all music. Sound. Entire sound system in India starts with the Samaveda. And the Samaveda is not chanted, it is sung. Samagayanti, it's not chanted. And then when he talks about the great Munis, the Rishis, he says, among the Munis, I am Kapila. Kapila is such an important... So he teaches Sankhya first. Krishna teaches him Sankhya, about the gunas and the attributes. We'll skip, go fast. We're not going to do the whole Gita now. That will require a 7-day saptaha, maybe sit down and do the Gita. But I don't know if I can stay in Australia for so long. So, of course, it's a wonderful experience. And then he goes on to Karma Yoga, the secret of work. Okay? And so on and so on and so on. Now, whenever I do the Gita for the first time in any place, I like to do the chapter, which is the 12th chapter, called Bhakti Yoga. There are various reasons for this. The 12th chapter is called Bhakti Yoga, which means the yoga of devotion. Now people usually think Bhakti, it's for illiterate villagers and old grandmothers who are retired. Bhakti, what is this Bhakti? We want something else, yoga, this, that. The importance of Bhakti is indicated by the fact that this chapter on Bhakti is the 12th chapter. So why 12th chapter? Why can't Krishna, if it is so important, declare it in the beginning? Instead of Sankhya, why not start with that? Now we examine this carefully. Till chapter there is Dhyana Yoga, meditation and so on. 6th chapter. Till the 9th chapter, everything is going according to design. Which means Arjuna is sitting there and Krishna is riding, is the Sarathi, the driver, the chauffeur. What is it? Chauffeur. So please respect your chauffeurs. In this country we are our own chauffeurs. So Krishna is the chauffeur, the driver, and Arjuna is in the chariot and he is leading. Everything is okay. He is explaining. Arjuna has questions, problems, he asks him. For instance, in the chapter called Yoga of Meditation, Dhyana Yoga, Krishna explains to Arjuna that the mind of a yogi who meditates is like a flame when there is no wind, steady. So acquire this capacity through one-pointed attention. And Arjuna says to Krishna, look, you saying all this, it's easier to control the wind than to control the mind. And you say the mind should be like a flame which the wind doesn't move and so on. It's not possible. Please, is there something else? So it's a very lively dialogue. After all, they're good friends, very good friends. And they're also related to each other. And they're almost the same age, physically. So it's like a friendly relationship. We can always say, no, I don't agree, you're wrong, I want to understand, and so on. But then suddenly, in chapter 10, Krishna suddenly changes his tune and starts saying, among the munis I am Kapila, and Arjuna is thinking, what has happened to this guy? He was just now talking to me on equal terms, and now he says, I am the Himalaya, I am the Meru, I am the Samaveda, I am Kapila Muni, and so on. What is this business? So what is happening here is very slowly Krishna has managed to make a dent in his so-called logical, rational 1 + 1 2 mind. Because to go to these higher things, this linear logic of going from here till there is being abandoned slowly by giving a shock to Arjuna, saying that what you think is so rational may not be so. Now watch out, because it depends on very limited inputs that you have. It's more to do with what in modern times may be called fuzzy logic. So he's trying to break down that system of saying that I'm absolutely sure I'm right, because 1 + 1 is equal to 2, and he's saying in this case 2 और 2 5 हो सकते, 2 + 2 may be 5. You don't know, because it's higher mathematics, not the ordinary arithmetic. So he's going from Newtonian physics into the field of quantum physics, where everything is uncertain. Now Arjuna wouldn't know that unless he breaks it by a contrast which is unimaginable for Arjuna. How can this guy who is sitting here and talking to me suddenly become Meru, the Himalayas, or Kapila? So that is kind of slowly an attempt to break this down. Now if you think that this is illogical, let me explain. We need to go slowly. What do we mean when we say that I have a rational blueprint? It's very nice to be rational, nobody denies that. Even when I'm talking, this is quite rational. But when we say a rational blueprint, what do we mean by that? Which means that depending on the inputs that I get from my 5 sense organs. We only have 5 sense organs. Do we have any other? We have the eyes, we have the ears, we have the smell, which is the nose, we have the tongue, taste, and we have touch. These are our 5 sense organs, the Panchendriyas, as they are called traditionally. We have no other access. Our instruments of perception are 5, and the inputs therefore come from these 5. And when I say this is my logical blueprint, this blueprint is manufactured only from the inputs that I receive from these 5 sense organs, and then processed by the mind, of course. Right? Now what if I say that these inputs may at the worst be illusionary, and at best may be inaccurate also sometimes, not always. Let me explain this. Every morning we see the sun rise, right? That's what a chakshu, one of the instruments of perception, says. Every morning the sun rises. Every evening the sun sets. If seeing is believing, then it must be right. But a high school kid will tell you, why a high school, elementary school kid, that the sun neither rises nor sets. But Dad, you are wrong, it doesn't rise. Why? Because it's the earth that goes round. But what do we see with our senses? The sun rises and the sun sets. How much can I depend on this particular instrument of perception? For example, like the eye. Now, it's based on inputs from such instruments that the mind forms its own rational framework or blueprint. Of course, we should be proud of it, no question. But just think how there are cracks in our so-called blueprint because the inputs may be inaccurate. Well, I could go into greater detail, but at least one example, which is, this is not mine, it comes from a great text called the Saddharma Pundarika. I don't know if there are translations, but you should read it. It's an in-depth study of matter and the world as we see it. The conclusion in that is that the world that we know is only the impression that the sense organs give of an object in front of us. We really don't know what the object is. We only know the impression of the object. Actually what it is, we don't know. Example. I have a particular kind of lens in my eye. I was born with this lens, right? So therefore I see a thing in a certain way. I see this as a straight rod because I have a convex lens. I'm born with it. I have no other way of seeing this. I don't see it like this. Now imagine a fly, a common house fly. Now it has what's called a compound eye, many eyes. How would it see this? But from childhood, if it is taught that it is straight, the image that it sees, even though it's like this, it will call it straight. So there is no way we can have an absolute truth. We can only be relative to our organs of perception. And all our rational framework is manufactured out of that. So it may at least give it the benefit of doubt that it may not be so. It may be something else. The elephant, which has a very small eyes, actually sees human beings as huge things coming to it. This is why they attack. But we think, oh, why? But we are only this much. So organs of perception. So all our mind processes this and manufactures its own rational framework, which may not be the absolute truth. Okay. Now, think about it. It's all food for thought. You don't have to swallow it. Just think about it. Nobody in Vedanta says that you have to accept everything. You need to look at it carefully. So, the ultimate understanding from this, what we discussed, is that what the world that we are absolutely sure of, that it exists like this, may not be. That it exists, there is no doubt. But how it exists depends on our instruments of perception. And other creatures with other instruments of perception may be seeing it differently. So what is the actual definition of the thing? We don't have. We can only say, yeah, it exists. How? I don't know. That's a good start. A good start. Now, you understand what I'm trying to say? Now, in the early days, when we started with Newtonian physics, we were absolutely certain about things. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. There's gravity, and so on and so forth. So clear. We thought it's also clear. Then slowly, the scientist, who is a very honest man actually, who doesn't believe in theories, went into the subject closely, researched, and the physicist went deep into the study of matter, and then now they've ended up in the study of quantum physics, which is the smallest, I can't even say particle, the smallest brick, the smallest unit, if you can call it a unit. You can't see it with any microscope. It's known only through its reactions. There is no, even the electron microscope cannot see a quantum meson or whatever. It is only decided that it exists based on its reactions. So finally, they've come to the understanding that the quantum basic of this whole world, nobody, an honest physicist would tell you, I really don't know what it is. So from the absolute certainty of Newtonian physics, we've come to the absolute uncertainty of quantum physics, which is good, to be honest. And because a scientist has no propaganda to, he's just looking at things actually as they are, and if they're honest, they admit, I've met people, I've talked to them, they admit that really you can't say. Why? Now this is called the theory of uncertainty. It's been accepted in quantum physics as the leading theory of the day, the theory of uncertainty. What does it mean? It means if you think that the smallest quantum thing is a particle, while you watch it in its reactions, it begins to behave like a wave. If you think it's a wave and you watch it, it's behaving like a particle. So nobody even knows if it's a particle or a wave. In fact, some scientists, it's not accepted by all at this point, have even come to the conclusion that it depends on the observer. David Bohm was one of the physicists who said it all depends on the observer. Because the observer looks at the particle, it becomes a wave. He looks at the wave, it becomes a particle. Is it reacting to the observer? So the observer becomes more important. Right? So, how is it linked to the Gita? So Arjuna is now with Newtonian physics. I mean in the spiritual field, not in the physical physics. And Krishna is shaking him out of that certainty and saying, wait, 1 minute, it could be not true. You think I am a human, I am a being sitting here, may not be true, I may be something else. How do you know? At least the question is asked, breaking down the absolute certainties. Okay, now comes the 11th chapter. That is terrible. It's like a shock to Arjuna. It's like a Hiroshima, Nagasaki. It's like suddenly this guy who was sitting and talking, till now he was only boasting, I am Meru and so on. Something happens to him and Arjuna sees the entire world coming in and going out of him. All the gods and everything inside. The whole world is coming out of this center, and then his logic, his rationale which he built up all these years is completely shattered. Where he comes to the point which the Upanishads declare, in manasa namanyute yana hurmano matam, which means, this is from the Kena Upanishad, which means that supreme truth is that which cannot even be accessed by the ordinary mind. And the only instrument we have is the mind. So, the ordinary mind with its 1 + 1, 2 subsides. Something else exists. Now, we go into the biological aspect of it, but I'll leave it here right now. So, when this happens, all I am going to say is that this world we live in, all of us, you and me, we can handle this world, we can understand this world, we can interpret this world based on certain structures in our brain. What we see today is what you can call the world of the frontal lobe. It has developed so much that this is the world we know. We are saying that there are many other parts of the brain which have been left unexplored because so much lopsided interest was shown in the frontal lobe. There are, and the whole process of yogic sadhana is to awaken these centers which are normally inactive in us. We don't need it for survival or existence, but we need it to go deeper within, which is beyond the ordinary senses. Which means there are other organs of perception in the human system which symbolically is represented by the third eye of Shiva, for instance, the Jnana Drishti. Trayambakam Yajamahe, the three-eyed Supreme Being. I'm not saying that the third eye can be opened by hitting a nail into your forehead. This is not what it's a terrible thing to do. But there are points. One of the important ductless glands in our system is the pineal gland, which sits deep inside the brain, somewhere like a small, shaped like a green chili, but very small. Just near the pituitary, but not the pituitary. Very close to your limbic system. Now, let's examine that, just one, to see if it's a possibility that there are other centers which are not active, which we don't need for ordinary survival or even for scientific advancement. Now, 60 years ago, roughly 60 years ago, could be 61, 62, okay? 60 years ago, the pineal gland was considered to be a vestige organ, which means like the vermiform appendix, a vestige organ, just there, nobody knows why it's there. I mean, it's accident. You know, everybody is on this accident business. So then, a few years after that, maybe 50 years ago, it was discovered that it's a very important organ, the pineal gland. Why? Because it's in control of our, what in medical terms is called the circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm means the waking and the sleep. The wake and sleep cycle is the circadian rhythm. When you travel in different time zones and you go back, you have a jet lag because the circadian rhythm has been disturbed. And the pineal gland contains, it may have other things. At the moment they say that it contains a hormone which is called melatonin. So when you have jet lag, the doctor will say pop a melatonin pill. Not a good idea. Allow it to settle down. It has to move naturally. Better. Anyway, so when melatonin goes into the bloodstream, then you feel comfortably asleep. You want to sleep. Usually when it becomes dark, when there are no lights, stimulated. So now they say it's a very important organ out there. It produces melatonin, which is responsible for your circadian rhythm, which when disturbed you cannot even sleep. Right? So how many such centers may be there in the human system? Now, why I am saying this is 100 years ago, the great Swami Vivekananda said that perhaps the pineal gland is the stem of the Sahasrara, the center in the brain. Today they say that it controls the sleep-wake circuit. Now, in the deep study of Vedantic psychology, or psychology of Vedanta, let's say, human consciousness is divided into the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state, and then a state which is normally we don't know about, called Turiya. Now, if the pineal gland in the center of the brain may be controlling deep sleep, Sushupti, isn't it possible that it might have something to do with Turiya, which is the higher spiritual state, and the borderline between Sushupti and Turiya is very narrow, like a thread. Why? Because it's the state which the yogis call Turiya. It is as if you are aware in your deep sleep, which is not possible normally. When we wake up, we say, oh, we had a blissful sleep. But while asleep, we don't know. We are not aware. It's a good thing we are not aware of anything, because that's why we get rejuvenated when we wake up. We don't even know, I don't know I'm M when I sleep. My sleep is a little different, but generally And then when you wake up, then you're M, so you're related to others. But otherwise you're free. So, in deep sleep, the state of Turiya and Sushupti are very close to each other. If you can be conscious in Sushupti, then you have touched Turiya. But please, there is no good news that through Sushupti you can reach Turiya. So that is not possible. I wish it could be. But that is the nearest Turiya that we know of, generally. So, here, in the 10th chapter, in the 11th chapter, Krishna has managed to break down Arjuna's absolute certainty. See, it is like that. So that is the time when Bhakti can be introduced. When it is said that the ultimate is more a matter of the heart than of the so-called brain, which says this is this plus 2 and so on. So when the ordinary thinking or the ordinary rational logic has subsided temporarily, you need to get it back when you go out, otherwise you might hit the car and the car shed. But when this happens, then comes the feeling called bhakti or energy. So it's not different. Bhakti is not different from jnana or yoga. It's the same. But it's that which comes with feeling, because feelings don't need words. Sound, music. So Arjuna is taken very slowly and introduced into Bhakti Yoga. Now it's very interesting. The Bhakti Yoga chapter starts with a beautiful question. It's one of the few chapters in the Gita which begins with Arjuna, not Krishna. Because most chapters are Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, so says Bhagavan, Krishna. But some chapters, also the 12th chapter starts Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna says or asks. Vacha can be both a question as well as a statement. So Arjuna asks. What does he ask? He says, some say that the Supreme Reality is abstract, untouchable, indefinable, formless, and so on. And it should be worshipped that way. Some say that it is concrete, like you sitting before me, and that divinity can be worshipped as you are now, in form. Among the two, who do you consider to be the greatest bhakta or the greatest of yogis among the two? Among the people who follow the two modes of worship. Now Krishna, as is his usual practice, instead of directly answering the question, because some questions can't be answered directly, goes about in a beautiful way. In fact, you must remember that even though the chapter is called Bhakti Yoga, the term yogi and bhakta are interchanged. Some places it is yogi, in some places he says, Yah bhakta same priya, that bhakta is dear to me. So, yes, so what do you think? Because you are the authority. If you say so, I'll accept it. So Krishna says, those who worship the Supreme as the immeasurable, ultimate, supreme, untouchable being and so on, like the great Rishis did, they are also great yogis, no question. But those who worship me as I am or in different forms, they are no less, because we human beings, he says, are people who are so dependent on nama and rupa, name and form, that it's not easy for most people to suddenly go and get absorbed in the absolute supreme reality. While it is true, it is there, of course. Because we are all name and form oriented, right? Or most human beings, most of us. Otherwise, why would I wear good clothes with rupa? So when I say somebody's name, nama, immediately I associate with my past experience of that rupa, of that form. Or if that form comes to my mind, I say, oh, this is so and so, the name. They are interconnected. And we are all oriented towards this name and form. I'm sure that most of us would be very unhappy if somebody calls us by the wrong name. And as far as rupa is concerned, we all like images. And I think the best we like is our own image. You see, what do we do early in the morning nowadays? As soon as you wake up, what do we do? In the bathroom. We look at ourselves in the mirror. How many hairs have become grey? How many more wrinkles? That's why all the cosmetology is a huge practice. How many wrinkles do I have? Right? Have I plucked my eyebrows? I mean, it's okay. I'm just saying how we are so attached to our form and name. And if I say that I am, I'm a very highly evolved person, I don't care for name and form, absolute, but I am attached to my form. So we are all ultimately form and name oriented in some way or the other. Right? So, if that is so, Krishna says, it's good to start this way, because then it's much more natural for you. But then he comes to the next step, where he says, well, it doesn't matter how you consider or conceive of the Supreme Being. That is not so relevant to the point. Whether with form or without form, or abstract or concrete, that's not important. Then what is important? Important is the qualities that are developed in the bhakta or the yogi. Here yogi and bhakta are interchangeable. Certain qualities are required. If these qualities are present, one who worships the Supreme as the abstract or with form is okay. That bhakta is dear to me, doesn't matter. But the qualities have to be there, attributes have to be there. So Arjuna, what attributes? Starts like this. The first attribute, Krishna states in the 12th chapter, is Samniyam Indriya Gramam, which means one who has control over his senses and his emotions. One who controls his mind rather than runs after the mind. One whose senses are under control of the mind, not to not indulge, but to keep in control. In this world, we all have to indulge in our senses, no question. This is the world, material world. There has to be what we call a lagan. So can we hold that patwa in our hands? A yogi who has developed the capacity to control his sense organs and his emotions. In fact, emotions are linked to the sense organs in some way. The Gita goes in some other chapter into an analysis of anger, how it happens. Yayato vishayan punsaha. It says we are surrounded by the objects of the senses. Sangasteshu upachayate, and constant exposure to that. Sangat samjayate kamaha. Desire comes for them. Right? And when desire comes, suppose I desire something, and there is somebody else standing in my way, I'm angry with that. It may be a person or a thing or a situation. Anger develops. So where is the root of it? The desire, the sense organs. And anger, is like a short madness. You don't even know what you're doing. And with constant desire, it's a possibility that constant anger might be there in us. We may not express it, of course, because we like to be civilized human beings, which is worse because it's inside. And therefore we are constantly not rational, because anger, when you're angry, you cannot be rational. We think we are rational, but we cannot. We do actions on a impulse. So then when this happens constantly, then our intellect also suffers. Buddhi nasho. Buddhi is destroyed. Buddhi nasha pranashyati. And your life is also destroyed. So, samniyam indriya gramam, one who has developed some amount of control over his sense organs and emotions, which are linked. Quality 1. Doesn't matter whether he looks at the Supreme Being as abstract, formless or with form, it doesn't. Quality of the mind. Then the next, sarvatra samabuddhaya. Is it possible for the person to remain tranquil under all circumstances? Because in this life we go through all circumstances. Sometimes there is happiness, sometimes there is sorrow, sometimes people blame you, sometimes they praise you, right? Sometimes there is heat, sitoshna sukha dukkheshu. There is sukha and there is dukkha, and there is heat and there is cold. Tulya ninda astutir mauni. The mauni, the yogi, is one who considers praise and blame as equal. He is not moved by it. You know how our lives are. If somebody praises me, I am in cloud 9. And if somebody says I am a fool, I am down. I am not, I am just saying, I am down. This is our life, up and down all the time, dependent on what others are saying or what others feel. Can such a mind be tranquil? Because it is dependent on what others think about you. What does it matter? I always say, suppose I don't know English, and you call me a fool, what does it matter? And if I know Hindi, I might think you're calling me a fool, a flower, and I'm highly elated. I'm a flower. Language is the meaning that we give to words that creates the problem. And pleasure and pain. You know, in this world, both are there. You can't, all our lives we spend trying to push sorrow away and keep only happy. It's not possible. The very movement you try to push sorrow away, you're creating more sorrow. I'm not painting a bleak picture of life. I am very happy. I'm just saying that it is so. And if you understand this, then even in sorrow you're okay, because it's bound to happen. When there is happiness, there is bound to be, there is night, there is day, there is darkness, there is light. These are two sides. And in fact, there have been great devotees, great bhaktas who have welcomed sorrow, saying, oh, this can teach me a good lesson. Give me more. We have not reached there, so don't call for sorrow. The moment sorrow comes, we start running. So what I mean to say is, there's a beautiful story in the Puranas about Kunti, you know. Please don't pretend to be Kunti, it's only for Kunti. We can't do that. It's called Kunti's boon, B-O-O-N, boon. The Kurukshetra battle is over and Krishna is leaving for Dwaraka. So he goes to everybody and says bye-bye. So his equals he embraces, and the elders he bows down and touches their feet. Krishna. Here we won't do it ourselves. But Krishna, who is depicted in the Mahabharata as a Purna Avatara, is touching the feet of the elders. Okay? Anyway, that's okay. So then he goes, who is the matriarch of this whole family? Kunti. Kunti Devi. He goes to Kunti and he touches her feet and he says, Kunti, I am going to Dwarka now. I won't be back. So this is the right time to ask for a boon if you have any. Ask. It shall be given thee. You know the beautiful statement in the Sermon on the Mount in the Bible, in the New Testament. Ask and it shall be given thee. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto thee. I always say knock and it shall be opened unto thee. So, knock here. So, he says, now ask me for a boon. So there's a beautiful dialogue. Kunti says to Krishna, look, enough. Don't do this drama with me anymore. I know who you are. I know what you do. I know the whole thing. So don't play this drama anymore. You started the war. And then you joined our side and we won the war. It was a big deal. And now you're saying, ask for a boon. I'm going to ask you for a boon. You cannot refuse it. Say, what's the boon? Bring all the sorrows of this world on my head. Krishna doesn't know what to say. He says, bring all the sorrows of the world on my head. He says, why? Because it's only in sorrow that the human mind generally thinks about God. There is the Sikh Granth in which Kabir says, Dukh mein sumiran sab kare, sukh mein kare na koi. So, when sorrows come, I will certainly call you. There is no other way. And I know that if I call, you come. This is guaranteed for me. I know this. So then what more do I need? I keep calling, you keep coming. I see your blessed face all the time. That's all I want. I don't want anything else. Go to Dwarka. She says, don't tease me. I know you're not going anywhere. You're everywhere. So Krishna smiles and says, Tathastu, so be it. And goes to Dwarka. Or so pretends to go to Dwarka. Whatever. So, Sarvatra Samabuddhaya. The yogi or the bhakta is one who maintains tranquility. I mean, if this quality is there, the world will be a heaven actually. Under all circumstances, plus or minus. Okay? Then the mind also becomes calm. The senses have been controlled. The mind is not dependent on outward factors for its tranquility. It's by itself tranquil. The last, when that happens, the third quality automatically arises from the heart, which is compassion. And what is that? Sarva bhuta hite rata, Krishna's words. One who has the concern of all living beings in his heart. When I say his heart, also her heart, please. Nowadays I always add that because it could be trouble. So, one who has the concern of all living beings in their hearts. These three qualities, attributes, if they are there, Krishna says, consider that person, bhakta same priya, the bhakta who is closest to me. So, the rest of the Gita is the way how to get there in different ways. And finally, there is the 18th chapter, which is called the Moksha Sannyasa Yoga, which is when you touch finally the freedom, then you are a sannyasi. Throughout the Gita it says sannyasa is not throwing away things and walking off. Sannyasi is not stopping all your duties. Sannyasa is when one can live under all circumstances without being attached to it. No change of robe, no nothing is required. Well, it may help sometimes, but this is the teaching of the Gita, where one lives in this world, but one's mind is anchored in the core of consciousness. When this is understood, or when attempt is made to understand this, then we are studying the Gita. We are listening to the song of the Lord. Otherwise, the song is always there, but it goes above our heads. Grace always is there, but our windows are closed. And you can't dictate when the grace should blow. You can't dictate when the wind blows, right? But you won't feel it if your windows are closed. The entire process of spiritual practice is to lay open your windows and doors so that when it comes, which we cannot dictate, it comes in. We don't miss it. This, I think, in a way we have covered a little bit of the Gita. It's vast. I can't say I finished the Gita. It's impossible. You cannot finish it, but we have kind of looked at some aspects of the Gita. Let's put it that way. And if we have, then it's food for thought. When you go back, think about it. Don't leave it here. Think about it. Because, in the ancient system of teaching, it starts with first Shravana, listening, then Manana, taking it back into the mind and looking at it, ruminating over it. Then Nididhyasa, then studying deeper into it. And from there comes the understanding. So I may not have answered all your questions, but there is food for thought. And when the answers come from you, they will be your answers. If I tell you, it's my answer. Second hand anyway. So take these thoughts with you and think about it. Which doesn't mean I'm avoiding questions. So if there are a couple of questions, it's 7:20. So we started at 6, roughly, a few minutes here and there. So it's 1 hour is 60 minutes, and Sharad said 50 minutes. And it's almost 1.5 hours. But we still can have a few questions. But please let it be more relevant to the topic than some. And please, no political questions. Is that Gita? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Just want to ask about the mantra jap. Is it better to do mentally or
Better to?
better to do mentally, like in a mind, or better to do verbally, like
Okay. It's a good question. Good question. The mantra japa, first of all the mantra, then the japa. The mantra is that which turns your mind into a yantra. Man. When the mana becomes a yantra, means a machine with which you can achieve something. Yantra doesn't mean just pictures. It means machine. The mechanism. Let's say mechanism. So, to make the mind into a potent mechanism, to get somewhere, is the mantra. Right? Now, there are many kinds of mantras. Some mantras, it's good to chant loudly. Some mantras, it's good to just use lip movement. And some mantras, it's better to chant silently. I'll come slowly into this. Now, when you start a mantra, especially when you begin, it's always good to chant a little loudly. Doesn't mean that the neighbor should hear, but at least for yourself, to hear yourself, so that it becomes clear. Once it's clear and it becomes automatic, that you don't have to stress too much on the words, then you can do it silently. If you are aiming at going into deeper spiritual understanding, the deepening of meditation, then from the sound it should go into the silence. Yeah. So when it goes into the silence, then it's called ajapa japa. So you are not doing the japa loudly, but it's going on inside you. Right? So, but there are some mantras like the Gayatri, which when chanted not only affects you but affects others. In which case, it's a good idea to sit down and chant, at least audible to yourself. Need not be told outside. Audible to yourself. That vibration in the air can spread to others and bring about some change. Okay. Now there are some mantras which are supposed to be not chanted loudly at all, because which are kept secret. Such mantras, it's better to chant inside, mentally, in your mind. For instance, the mantras which are called Panchadashakshari or Sodasakshari, or some of the Sri Vidya mantras, these are to be chanted in your mind, because they are more to do with bringing about a change in your inner psychic mechanism. Now, the best mantra, of course, is the pranava, which is Om. And Om can be chanted loud, it can also be done silently. So, you will have to do your mantra, whatever mantra you are chanting, loud or silent, depending also upon what you have been advised to do by whoever has taught. But when you take a mantra, there's no point in doing it for a few days and then doing something else for a few days. And when you do, stay with it for some time, because it takes time to mature. Because you're dropping the seed, the bija. You drop the seed, it takes time to mature into a plant. So if you keep dropping different seeds, you know what I mean? So stick to it. Because people come to me and they say, I've been chanting mantras for 30 years and nothing is happening. So the first question is, what do you expect to happen first? Okay. Second question is, which one have you been chanting for 30 years? Then it turns out, in 30 years, he has chanted 30 mantras. So take time to choose your mantra. Every mantra is not suitable for everybody. Take time to choose. Once you have chosen, stick to it for some time till you begin to feel the effects of it. Okay? I hope may not have answered your question, but gives you food for thought.
People who usually follow Bhakti Yoga are the emotional people. Emotional people find it difficult to be Siddha Prajna. They're very fickle. Is there any practice or mantra that they should particularly do that helps them?
No, I wouldn't completely agree with you that when you say that people who follow the Bhakti Marga are emotional people. Yeah, in some way, yes, because they're, I would say, people of the heart.
That's what I mean.
The feelings rather than the brain. Not looking at hair-splitting arguments and trying to sort out whether the Brahman is here or there or 10 feet away. Yeah, I can understand. But because you're emotional, it doesn't mean that you should not maintain tranquility. Your emotions should be directed towards achieving your aim rather than in other things. You get what I mean? So, therefore, since this particular thing, Sarvatra Samabuddhaya, is referred to in that particular chapter of Bhakti Yoga, it means it's very applicable to Bhakti for the person who is of the heart. But then that anger, feeling, and all those commotions that happen should be directed towards your goal and not to the life on this earth. You get angry with God, doesn't matter. Don't get angry with your husband. I mean, sorry. Poor guy, he is not responsible that Krishna is not listening to you. He is not, I'm not. He himself is a wonderful man, so anyway. I'll come back to you.
Is third eye meditation, is there a risk of it becoming a distraction to the real purpose of meditation?
No, not really if you do it properly. See, when you say third eye, basically it's not a physical factor. However, since it's an inner opening, an activation of a certain area in the brain, it is somehow physically connected to the Ajna Chakra, which is called Bhru Madhya, between the brows. It can never be a distraction, from my understanding, because it can always lead you deeper and deeper and deeper into meditation, if you do it properly. However, for those who are more to emotional connection with the spiritual being, the heart center is a good place to go, the Hridaya. But ultimately, when the energy and your awareness goes higher and higher, it has to come here. It comes automatically. You don't have to press for it. You don't have to push. It comes. So it can never be a distraction. But you should learn it from a proper person who knows what he is teaching you. In fact, if you want to make it very simple, just to feel, take a piece of a feather or something and just rub it slowly. As you feel a ticklish feeling here, just put your attention there and sit down. Don't imagine anything, just sit. The feeling is more important than the visual. Sir?
When you say when the student is ready, the teacher will come. But till such time as the teacher comes, what would you recommend as a simple meditation practice?
For all people who are spiritually inclined, now spiritual inclination happens in many ways. Sometimes it happens when you ultimately see the futility of this. I mean, you don't want to die or commit suicide, but you feel it's so false. People don't mean what they say. And there is, you have happiness, but there is sorrow lurking around the corner. When you see this and you kind of say, I should look into something that is beyond. So in some people it happens that way, the aspiration for spiritual practice. The other happens sometimes in the presence of someone who has touched it. You feel, what is the secret of this guy's happiness? He doesn't seem to possess much, but he is very happy. So what is this? So then the inquiry, can I also touch this? Another mode of why you get interested. Now, I personally believe, it's my experience, when you come to a point where that's the most important thing in your life, it happens to different people in different stages of life. Sometimes when you're very young, sometimes later on after you experience the world, it doesn't matter. But when it happens, the urgency becomes so important that you say that this is what I really want, I don't want anything else. When this happens, then I think, while it's a good idea to search, I think the teacher somehow arrives from somewhere. And the teacher need not be somebody whom you have imagined to be the teacher. You see, the problem is sometimes we reject real teachers because we have an idea, an image of a teacher, flowing robes, long beard, which can be tucked into the shirt, and things like that. So when you actually see a genuine person, you don't look, you don't see. So I think when you look, it comes, it happens. However, till that happens, what to do? Go through all the literature possible, which you have, which fortunately we have with us, many kinds of literature, and see what way of approach suits you, which seems to appeal to you. Don't base it on your convenience. Don't say this is more convenient. No, what appeals to your mind. And then read the texts and material available on that subject. Don't start any practice unless somebody instructs you. Yeah, there are simple practices like, this is a simple but also an advanced practice, the chanting of Om, which is called the Pranava Sadhana. It's very easy to do, anybody can do it at any time, which is to sit down and just chant Om, long Om, stretch it and listen to it yourself. You can also combine it with the breath. Sit down and inhale, and when you inhale, chant one Om. When you exhale, chant another Om. So these are simple things which can, or people who want to do Nama Smarana or Japa can continue the practice of chanting a name or a Nama or a Japa, which you can pick up from any of the texts available and chant until the time when a serious seeker finds a teacher, a serious teacher. So this is important to note. A teacher is not interested in banners, maybe even not organizations, maybe, may not be, or it may not be spectacular, may be simple. Now, since you asked me this question, I'm going to tell you a a little Sufi story about a teacher and a student. Okay, interesting. The Sufis also have their own great traditions. Unfortunately, in all countries which have been ruled by Islamic caliphates, the Sufis have always been in danger. Some of them have been persecuted, some of them have run away and come to India because we welcome everybody. Anyway, not here, sorry. Here also, I think, for all you know, there might be Sufis here. Now, you can't make out a Sufi. How do you make out? There is no external paraphernalia. So I'll tell you two stories. We have time? Sharad said some people complain that 50 minutes are over and are you okay? So the first story is about the Guru. There was this man, since it's a Sufi story, it's set somewhere in the Middle East. It can be anywhere. So there was this man who, when he was a very small boy, he was born under very poor circumstances. Okay. The thing is here, I can't see your faces because it is dark. Here is full light. So he was very poor. And then he also had this great spiritual aspiration to become more spiritual, to understand the truth and so on. But since he was born poor, he also wanted to become rich. So somewhere in the process, the spiritual aspiration, the little flame remained inside, while his desire to become rich propelled him on to start a business and so on, and he became a rich man. By the time he was 50 years old, he was a very... In the Middle East, when you say you're a rich man, it means you're a merchant. You have a caravan, many caravans. You travel with goods, you sell them. This is what is called. So he became a very rich man. When he became 50 years old and he had all the money he wanted, it suddenly occurred to him, I've been pursuing a rainbow, an illusion, because I thought by making a lot of money I will become a happy man. But I'm not happy. I can buy everything with money, but I can't buy happiness. So he went back to his early aspiration for spiritual progress. The flame was still there, it's flickering, but it was there. So he said, I think now it's time to get rid of this and go back into my spiritual aspiration. Blow so that the flame increases. So what did he do? He gave away his business to his sons and just kept a little money for himself. Meanwhile, his interest in spiritual matters compelled him to buy books and literature on spiritual matters. So he had an entire library. Is what people say. You may have an entire library but know nothing in the books. So what he did, he just kept a little bit of money to build a cottage in an oasis. In those countries, the only place where you have water and so is an oasis. Where we don't realize the importance of it. So he went to an oasis, built a little cottage, also had a library so he could now he could pursue his books with complete attention because there was no other work. And then there was a big problem. Having been a rich man for so many years in the Middle East, here it's different. He had even forgotten how to make a cup of tea because there were servants always serving tea with a samovar. So he scourged the village, he went around the villages and found a man who could cook for him. So then there was no problem. Food problem solved, important problem. So he took his cook and he went to the cottage. And for 7 years he studied the books deeply. At the end of 7 years he realized that this which I am seeking, needs a guru. Well, in Sufi terminology, needs a sheikh or a murshid. He needs a teacher. Now, where to find a teacher? So he went out and started searching in the desert. Around there was desert, in the middle, near the oasis. So there were some mystics living in caves, wearing woolen clothes. You know, the Arabic word for wool is suf, the Sufi. And he looked at many people, but he found that it's not suitable for him. He didn't like, he said, it doesn't gel with me. So he went along looking. We don't have the luxury for that kind of thing, but he had. And he looked around. One day he saw a man coming, a very vulnerable looking man with a flowing white beard and a green turban and rosaries on his neck and a very solemn face. So he went to him and he greeted him and said, "Sir, I'm looking for a teacher. Can you be my teacher? Guide." The man said, "First of all, how do you know that I am a great spiritual person? By my appearance? I could be a pretender. How do you know? In any case, you seem to be a very sincere seeker. So I am ready to accept you as a disciple. But I have a very big problem. Problem is that I cannot take you as my disciple without asking my master, my permission of my master." So he said, "Then why don't you go ask your master?" And he said, "Now that is the problem I was talking about. My master has wandered away somewhere 7 years ago. I can't find him. If I find him, I'm actually here looking for him. Then I'll ask him and then take you as a disciple." He said, "I am also there looking for a master. So if you give a description, we can search together." So he said, "Yeah. Well, he's a short man. His upper part of his body is usually bare. He just wears a lungi-like thing. And it's difficult to make out. He's nondescript. But the thing is, he has one big expertise. What is that? He's a very good cook." So this man said, "Just a minute, sir. 1 minute. Describe that again." So he said, "This sounds like my cook who's been with me for 7 years. Can you please come home?" So he said, "All right." So he took him home. And as they entered, the kitchen door opened and the cook came out with a towel on his left shoulder. As soon as this great man saw the cook, he prostrated before him and said, "Oh master, where were you all these 7 years?" He said, "I was with this guy for 7 years." He said, "But this guy is still looking for a teacher." He said, "Yeah, it took me 7 years to drill it into his head that he needs a teacher." So he said, "Now what?" Now he said, "I have other work to do, so please take charge of him." You know what I mean? It's difficult to figure out. Okay, that's one thing. So we'll end today with one more Sufi story, which is very interesting. There was a disciple of a very advanced Sufi. You'll be interested in this, because it's like us. There was a disciple, very advanced Sufi. He himself was quite advanced, who lived in the United Kingdom, very close to Hyde Park, in an apartment. So if you have to have an apartment in Hyde Park, you must have a lot of money. So he was actually an executive in a bank, Bank of England. So from his bedroom window, he could see the Hyde Park. Little distance, but he could. And he used to go to his office and work wearing a suit, 3-piece suit, executive, Bank of England, and come back, continue his practice at home. So one day he saw a very peculiar sight. He looked out of the window and he saw a man in Hyde Park wearing a long green robe, patched in different places, and rosaries, and a green turban, and a flowing beard, and talking away, holding forth. And there were some people around him listening to him, asking questions. First day he saw him, he ignored it. Second day again saw him, he ignored it. Third day he said, this is curious, I must go and find out what's going on. So he went to him. You know, the Sufis are known, traditionally they wear patched robes, like the old times Buddhist monks used patched robes. When it's torn, they stitch it together. They don't get a new cloth. Anyway, so he went to him and said, sir, greetings. Who are you? What are you doing here? The man said, I am a Sufi. This guy said, I am also a Sufi, sir. He said, okay, you're a Sufi, but why are you wearing these weird robes? He said, what do you mean weird robes? This is the uniform of a Sufi. He said, look at me, I'm wearing a normal clothes. Yeah, you may be, but you're not a Sufi maybe. He said, but why do you say that? Then he said, you know, the Sufis have a standard textbook. Whatever order they belong, they have to go through one standard textbook called Kasful Mahjub, which means revelation of the veiled. A revelation of the veiled. It was written by a great Sufi teacher 800 years ago called Ali Hujwiri, whose tomb is in Lahore now. There people refer to him as Data Ganj Baksh. There's a tomb there. So he said, have you read The Revelation of the Veiled by Ali Hujwiri? He said, yes sir, I have read it. Did you see the description of how a Sufi should be? Like patched clothes and turban? He said, yes. But he said, but sir, that was written 800 years ago. A Sufi is one who adapts to circumstances. That was written 800 years ago. And the guy said to him very softly, but I read it only last week. There you go. The less you know, the more spectacular. Sharat says yes. Thank you, boss. Thank you very much. I think we had a wonderful, enjoyable evening, and I hope you take back what we discussed and think about it. I am on email, so you can keep in touch. Ask me questions on mail. Thank you. 1 second. Peace first, last. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thank you.